you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
In this episode, Aaron and I are going to get a bit more personal. We're going to be talking about the toll of stress and what to do when you're struggling. So to give you a little bit of backstory, Erin and I gather and we meet outside of our recording time and we talk about how things are going and what do you all need to listen, what's going on, and what's going on personally as well, and what are the topics that we want to talk about, what guests make sense, and that's how we plan to give you all the best that we can. And this last week's, we've both been very, very busy, and we've both been maybe a little bit more stressed than our usual, maybe even tapping a little bit to the overwhelm. And as you can hear it in my voice, I have been a little bit sick. And then Erin asks me, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And have you taken time off? And then my answer was like, I have been taking care of myself, but no, I have not taken time off. And then it's like that insight and the accountability within ourselves to then say, what are the things that we talk about that maybe we're not always practicing? And what do we need to check in with ourselves? And then what's the message that we want to share with you? So that's kind of the origin of this podcast, but it's going to be very important because we really need to be hearing this, including ourselves. How does stress happen in your life? And the understanding that it's cumulative. I say this, if we take a snapshot of what's going on in our lives, we can deal with it. Of course, we're all smart, we're hardworking, we're heart-driven. Of course we can, but that's not always the right question to ask. Sometimes the right question to ask is, what are the other million things that are on my plate? Do they all need to be on my plate? And how are things adding up? And at what point do they stop being additive and then they become exponentially heavier? And that's kind of how my plate feels right now. It's full of amazing things, but it's getting to that place where, like I say, our brain goes 1, 2, 3, too many. Like it feels like that, like too many. So I'm in that process of recognizing what do I really need to keep on my plate. I have a retreat for the women in medicine I coach next week. So that needs to be my focus, not on all the other million things. And yes, I have to do taxes at some point, but that's not what I need to do this weekend. And right. And that's some of the things coming up, and then really looking inside and talking about what's really important and what's going on, how you're feeling.
And I love that we're bringing this up, and we have so many personal examples. And I know for myself, when I started working with a coach, I thought my coach must have it all together. She must be perfect because she's a coach and she has great coaches. And then as we got to know each other, she's a human being too. And I realized, just because you're a coach, just because you're a physician, just because you work in healthcare, doesn't mean you do all the things that you're supposed to, or that you coach, or that you share with others or encourage others to do. And I wonder, Joanne, from your perspective, why is this topic of the toll of stress and when it causes struggles so important for women physicians?
So I'll speak my own example in our conversation earlier of, right, like you asking me, how are you doing? And I'm like, fine. And you're like, fine. Right. And then say, well, I'm fine in this aspect, not so well in this other. So I think it's just that pause that we don't always give to ourselves of recognizing just because we're moving forward, just because we're doing things doesn't mean that it's the best time. And I think that that's something that a lot of us struggle with because we are resilient to the point that it can go against us. I've used this analogy before of when you stretch that rubber band so much that it loses its form. And it's so important to talk about this because we need to have our own red flags of when we're stretching a little bit beyond our bandwidth and stopping and asking for help, recognizing it before we overstretch to where we lose our form. and recognizing that this is our life. We all go through this. And just because we share a similar experience, it doesn't mean that it's okay. It doesn't mean that's normal. It doesn't mean like that's such a common answer of, well, that's my life, or that's the way it is for all of us. And then the better question is, does it really need to be this way? Even with compassion to what's going on, asking, where can I delegate? Where can I ask for help? And knowing, how does it feel to you? Like, do you know how to recognize when you're in that place, when you're going from stress to struggle, or when what we talk here often of when we're struggling in silence? And it's not necessarily because we don't want to talk about it, sometimes because we don't even recognize it for ourselves. So that's just the recognition. I think it's so important for us to realize and talk about it and hear.
And I also think it's important for women physicians because your work is so essential, both at work, taking care of patients, and also usually at home, because you provide such a big role in your home. And just because you're a woman physician, you still, in general, have more household responsibilities. If you're a parent, you still take care of more of the parenting responsibilities than your spouse, if you are one of the averages talked about in the research. And so all of those roles are really important. And I oftentimes quote Greg McKeown from the book Essentialism. So he wrote a book on eliminating the things that are non-essential to your life. And I talk about in my trainings about getting more efficient, how many women physicians, we have our list of things to do is like this enormous turkey platter. And that's meant to serve 18 people, and you're one person. And not only is it enormous, but I picture it's heaped full up to the ceiling, full of all the things you're responsible for. And when it's too full, things just start falling off. And that's how I feel like my life has gotten recently, that I'm not able to track everything. And even though there are lots of good things, I'm asking myself, what's essential? Because there's too many for me to manage. And I've become much more aware and encourage the women I coached. How big is your plate? Is it a normal sized dinner plate or a turkey platter? And how are you able to manage all of those things that are on it? And can you manage them all well? And when I read the next book by Greg McKeown after Essentialism, I don't remember the name of it, but he basically said, I wrote the book on only keeping essential things in your life. And now what happens when there's too many excellent choices and you've already eliminated all the good ones? There's still too much. Now what? Or you figured it out and now something happened. You've got a sick family member. You are going through a divorce. You have major life circumstances. And now what you've whittled things down to is still too much. And as women physicians, we have so many important and even critical roles. Maybe you're also taking care of ailing parents, and that takes a toll. And so just acknowledging, as Joanne said, acknowledge where you're at this season in your life. Give yourself credit, and let's not minimize.
Yes, I know. For me, beyond my gigantic to-do list that we've talked here, and Erin is so good at, reminding us that having the efficiency in time of going from a very long to-do list to your top 3. And I'm usually really good at doing that. And then when my top 3 is top 6 and top 9, it's like multiple columns of top 3. And where I start having conversations in my head of all the things I need to do, I know, okay, that's a cue for myself to know, what do I need to do? Where am I? How am I feeling? Right? Like having the right questions to ask ourselves instead of just asking, can I do this? Because the answer will probably be yes. And then but is that the best use of my time at this point? If it's that essential at this point. So recognizing that for yourselves, I think it's key.
And also not only that, but at what cost? And oftentimes as a woman physician and, spouse or parent or partner, we oftentimes take the hit, and the cost comes at our own expense, whether that's lack of sleep, whether that's lack of self-care, whether that's lack of time off, hobbies, recreation. And sometimes we accept too high of a cost, and it's okay to advocate for ourselves. So don't forget the cost to you. And is that okay? Or can you do a better job at not only taking care of what you need to, but also taking care of yourself?
And let me ask you this, Erin. What would be a good thing for a listener to pay attention to in terms of what kind of signs and symptoms can they think of within themselves to recognize that they're at that level of that high stress and struggling?
As Joanne and I talk about, awareness is so key. And if you're not in tune because maybe you're so busy or distracted or on the go, it might be difficult. And so I would encourage you to pause and check in with yourself. I'll share some of my own red flags that I see going, okay, this is becoming a problem. So I coach on a planner system. And as Joanne talks about, what are the 3 things? Our brain can remember 3 things. And when I look at my planner, and I'm looking at it right now, and you're supposed to choose a daily big 3. So 3 big important things for the day. And then the other stuff is your to-do list. Maybe it's 15, 20, 30, 50 different things. And when I see that my daily big 3 is empty and my page is full, I'm showing it to those watching, this entire page is full of all these busy works to do, and my top 3 is empty. I coach on this. I'm a trained trainer in coaching this system, and I meet with my clients on this. And yet my plate has gotten so full that it's been a struggle for me. So that to me is my to-do list is bigger than my priority list. Being in paying attention to my body, sometimes I might get little like, how fast is my heart rate going right now? And a little palpitation, or like, I'm not a very anxious person. And yet I've got this, I feel like I'm being bathed in cortisol. And so what are the cues for my body? For some people, maybe that's some nausea. Sometimes it's tension or migraine headaches. What's the frequency of those bodily cues? And then lately for me, usually I'm a really good sleeper. And the only time I would wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to go back to sleep is when I was really angry at work. So not feeling appreciated or seen or heard. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just could not go back to sleep. And that's become much less common for me now. I'm my own boss. So if I'm upset at my work, I get to check in with myself. And lately I've had so many projects going on over the last 3 weeks. I feel like my speed has gone from like 200 miles an hour to about 6,000 miles an hour. And I'm used to going fast, but this is like way too fast. And I'm waking up at 2:30 in the morning. So once a week for the last 3 weeks, I've woken up at 2:30 in the morning, could not get back to sleep. And this week when I got up at 2:30 in the morning, I was like, well, I know I'm not going to go back to sleep. Got up at 3 and I worked until 10 p.m. with hardly a break. And I was exhausted. And that is not sustainable. And I know that now. And so what is your sleep patterns? How are you eating and fueling? Are you just feeling tired and brain fog? And are you sick and not recovering? And if so, then what might happen if you do things differently? And those are some of the things I recognize in myself when I am way overcommitted. And I am looking actively to say, okay, I've got travel coming up. I've got a lot of events coming up that I'm planning. We've got a local event through my medical society. I'm going to a health leadership conference in Washington, D.C. I've got another conference that I'm sponsoring. So all of these things. And I'm like, okay, how quickly can I shrink this back down so it's much more manageable? And I wonder, Joanne, what are some of those things you find that are your red flags when you're aware and going, okay, something's got to change?
Yes, and thank you for all the examples, because it's good. Sometimes it's easier for us to recognize certain things more than others, right? Like what you're saying, waking up at 2, 3 in the morning, that's a pretty black and white way to recognize it. So you can divide it in kind of your physical symptoms, mental, emotional, and behavioral, right? So physical, like you mentioned, headaches, the sleep changes, stomach upset, or like overall muscle tension, restlessness. Mental could be that you're worrying a lot, the overthinking, maybe decision fatigue, memory problems. Emotional, maybe you're a little crankier, you're a little irritable, or anxious, right? Like that's one of mine. Like I go from stress, overwhelm, anxiety, and then I know that's a huge red flag for me. Or even sad. And then behavioral might be a little bit easier. Like I say, I'll spend a little bit of time scrolling on Instagram for fun. I don't get stuck. Maybe I'll just do a few minutes. I laugh, I share. But if I get stuck, like 10, 20, 30 minutes, I know that it's because my brain is busy. Or if you find yourself overeating or overworking is one that we don't always recognize. We're really good at being busy. And sometimes I call those the healthy denials because we're doing good things, but we're not paying attention to what we really need to be paying attention to. And then numbing behaviors, like I was saying, scrolling, shopping, drinking, eating, right? And it gets sensitive and it's not easy to talk about these things, but these are the subtle and then sometimes more black and white ways that you can check in with yourself and then look back and what are the patterns of behaviors that you recognize when you're not feeling good compared to when you're a little calmer and you feel like things are a little bit more under control.
And this brings up a common topic. I know I use this frequently. As I was saying, I teach this planning program. At least a couple of times a month on Sundays, I go through this and we have a work along session where my clients and I come together and we reflect on our prior week and we take our learnings from that week to use it to better plan our next week. So the power of reflection, and oftentimes I think women in medicine are so busy, we don't take that pause. And yet imagine if you learned 10% of the lessons in your prior week and brought them into your next week. And then the next week, you pause long enough to reflect, how did last week go? How can I bring that into my future? And so if you pay attention and go, oh, wow, I've had 3 migraines this week, and it's been 6 months since I've had migraines, or whatever your cues are, can you then use that information? Don't let that learning point or that learning go away. Take note, but we have to pause and reflect and go, why did this week go so awry? Or why did it go so well? Pause and learn from that. And on that, Joanne, I would love to hear more from your perspective about, now we've talked about this, why is it such an important topic for women physicians? How do we recognize it? And always we want to share with our listener, what can we do?
And the first step is exactly what you just said. We need to pause and acknowledge. So I'll give you 2 really good questions that you can ask yourselves. That sounds simple, but we don't always get to them. So I'll challenge you to check in with yourself and ask, what am I feeling right now? And don't do like I told Erin, that I said fine and not so fine here and there, right? So really checking in. Ask yourself this question as many times in a row until you really connect with how are you really feeling. And it doesn't need to be dramatic. It could be, I'm tired because I haven't been sleeping well, or I just want to go take a nap because I've been sick. And that's okay, but we need to get used to asking ourselves that question. And then the other one is, ask yourself, what is the biggest stressor weighing me down at this point? And connect with, sometimes we focus on what's right in front of us and we don't recognize that there are other things around it that keep our plates so heavy and we don't always know why we're feeling the way we're feeling. So to me, those are 2 really good questions that we can ask ourselves to check in and start there. What do you think about that, Erin?
Well, this reminds me, as I shared, I do a lot of teaching about how to create more efficient and effective workflows, get more done with less time and energy is one of my themes. And I teach, I don't know if people remember Tetris. So Tetris is a video game and you have different shaped objects that fall from the sky onto the ground. And you have to arrange these different shapes in a manner that they fit as tightly as possible. And as you proceed in the game, it goes faster and faster. So more of these objects are falling down. And I picture our lives as this Tetris game. And the more tightly packed you have the pieces in your schedule and in your life with no white space, no buffer. So that one extra thing, you get sick, your child gets sick. You need to work in one extra patient and there is no what I call white space. There's no place to put them. It's like Tetris at when you're going faster and faster and you have the skinniest little tiny piece and there's nowhere for it to fit because your schedule is so jam-packed. And that's where we don't even have time to do all the busy work, let alone you're saying like, how am I going to find time to pause and acknowledge because we've filled it so full. And so I would encourage you to schedule time in your day, whether it's 5 minutes at the beginning or end of your day, or whether it's, at 30 minutes each week to reflect. But if you never take time to pause and acknowledge, it's going to be really hard to learn any lessons from what you're going through. And you might be decades in and go, oh, I never stopped to learn anything. And that's not what we want for you.
Yes, so true. And the next thing that we can do, and I'll put my psychiatry hat on for a minute, is we need to check in with our central nervous system. And that sounds fancy. And what does she mean? And we're not necessarily talking medical, but because we're so trained to push through, we lost our ability to recognize the signals that our brain is giving us to slow down, take a break. And we need to check in to see, like Erin was sharing, am I too wired, or the opposite? Am I exhausted more than I need to? And I'll share a few easy things, because sometimes we know intellectually, we know these tools, but our central nervous system is so activated / triggered. I'm using that word appropriately in the like more of a medical sense, in terms of our central nervous system being activated, that we need to first tone it down, calm ourselves, and then use the tool. And these are things that we can do at any moment. So you've heard us talk about this, but it's worth reminding ourselves, and I'll raise my hand for this one. So we can think about our breathing. So an easy technique, there's all different kinds of breathing techniques, and I love them all. They're so good. But probably the one that we teach the most, because it's straightforward, is it's called the box breathing. So you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, then you exhale for 4, and then you hold for 4. Okay, so, and then there's even stickers for that where you're tracing the lines to kind of follow the shape of the square, because then you get that tactile sensation as well. So that's one thing that I recommend a lot. And I do it myself. I do it when I'm seeing patients, when I feel like I need to calm my central nervous system down. Another one that I love, and we talk about meditation, and then we hear, oh, I cannot meditate because my brain is all over the place. Yes, that's true. It still works. But I love an active meditation. So you can do this in the middle of a meeting. You can do this while you're walking. And it's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. So you focus on 5 things that you can see, and you pause on each one, and you find a little detail. 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can taste, and what's the one am I? And 1 thing that you can smell. Like it just cover all the senses. I might have got a little confused there. And that will, if you do that, it's very active. You're refocusing your brain. It's gonna take a few minutes, and you'll end up feeling more grounded and calmer. I promise. So those. We can keep on going on and on and on with ideas. Those are my 2 favorites. And of course, if you know me, you know that I would tell you, move your body. That's a great pattern interrupt. But if you're feeling more wired, more activating, the calming, grounding tools might be more beneficial. What would you say, Erin?
I love those prompts. And I made some notes of some of the things I do. Even as a physician, I didn't realize until later in my career that our body can tell our brain what's going on. And we think of our body or our brain is in control, but that's not always the case. So when Joanne's talking about the box breathing, when your body's breathing that way, it's triggering your parasympathetic nervous system, your calming nervous system. So your body's saying to your brain, everything's okay. There's no danger here. Because back in the day, if you were walking to the watering hole, and there was a lion that was there to eat you when you came out to the watering hole, then your sympathetic nervous system would be kicking in, right? But we don't think about that. That lion might be, I'm late getting my charts done. That lion might be, I'm running late in traffic, or my kid is sick. And so those things aren't going to kill you, but your brain doesn't know the difference. So when you can use your body with these methods, and your body's saying to your brain, it's all okay here. You can be calm. And one of the favorite ways I learned last year was at a retreat when I was in the Dominican Republic with Joanne and this leader, Lucy Dowdy. And Lucy had so many responsibilities, so many charities she helped take care of. She started the Children's Hospital in Santo Domingo. She had so many roles. And yet, when she walked very slowly, kind of like floated. I talked about her like this ethereal being. She was never in a hurry. And that kept her parasympathetic brain, her smart brain, in control instead of shifting back into our primitive brain being in control. And so I even wrote an article about this, channeling my inner Lucy when I would walk very slowly and intentionally. And one morning when I was passing people on the way to breakfast, when I was at this retreat, and I went, wait a minute, if I'm passing them, I'm probably walking too quickly. And I found that when I'm walking slow, and oftentimes I'll mirror that with talking slow, which to me is not my normal pace, and lowering my voice, all of those things help me tap into, I'm safe. My body's telling my brain it's all okay here. And that can shut down some of the cortisol, as opposed to, I'm going to go get another cup of coffee. I'm going to stay up that much later. I'm just going to run on adrenaline and caffeine. And so those are some of the tools that I've used. And Joanne, you also talked about grounding and actually physically on the ground. I've spent a lot of time barefoot when I've had a lot of stress, barefoot, walking on the grass in my yard, physically on the ground, in connection with the ground. And, there's different areas of science and all that. I'm not going to go there, but physically grounding can really help you be calm and being in nature and remembering, we used to be outside a lot more, and we are inside. I can't remember if it's 80 or 90% of our day on average, and that's not healthy. And so grounding and getting out in nature can help you rebalance things and get back into that calmer state.
That is so helpful. I love it. And that's great to go to our next tool, where it's reduce the noise and reconnect with your needs. And what do I mean by that? We usually take on so much, and the problem is that we end up disconnecting from what truly matters. And noise is everything that's around us. And again, we're very given, we're caretakers, so it's easy for us to put it in our plate and want to take care of everything, but then it's sometimes at the cost of our own well-being. So this is almost encompassing everything that we said so far, of checking in and what are the tasks that are in your plate? What are the commitments? Are there things that you can start delegating? What's really causing stress? And then what are the things that you want to protect? What's in alignment with what you want? And figuring those things first before you try to set a boundary, because you have to be very clear to what's important to you and then protect. Remember, boundaries are not to push things away, but rather to protect what's important to you. And then, of course, I always say, we need to get back to the basics of sleep, nutrition, light, mindfulness, all those things. But it's getting back to those basics to really take care of ourselves and assessing what's weighing us down, what's keeping that plate so heavy.
And just to add to that, Joanne, there's a lot of distractions out there that can cause a lot of noise, as you talked about, social media scrolling, our emails, podcasts, books on tape or books on Audible, conversations. And when I'm talking to my clients about, and there's just been, it seems like a lot of stress going on and lots of, what can I do about these things that are going on in my life? And I don't think we spend enough time with ourselves and our own brain, with our own thoughts, without music, without conversation, without distractions. And so really paying attention to, do you have any time in your day or your week where there's no noise and you just get to hang out with yourself and your own thoughts? And if not, I wonder what might happen for you if you allowed yourself, gave yourself permission And that, I think, can also help build that clarity like Joanne was talking about, to figure out, what do you even want? And if you don't spend time with yourself, it's really hard to figure that out.
Yes, one of my favorite questions with my patients and my coaching clients, especially when things do not feel well, is what's helping? What's been helping lately? And I keep it vague on purpose to see what comes up. And frequently when we're in a dark place, we'll say nothing, or we'll think of something big. And then I'll reframe the question of, what are those little things that you can do throughout the day that can help you, even if it's as a healthy distraction, without minimizing what's going on? And that's a really good question for all of us. What are those things? Is it listening to music, journaling, sitting down with your eyes closed, a little bit of quality time with your family, laughing, airhead time, like I say, even watching something on Netflix? Everything counts. And then we give ourselves permission for it. And this is a good segue into the last tool here, which is, what are those small actions for self-care that you can connect with? And we need to start by reframing self-care, because so often we call it a luxury or an indulgence, or I don't have time for that. And we need to reframe it that it's a need, a priority. That's how we recharge. That's how we show up for others. And that's how we avoid burnout, stress, anxiety in those extreme levels. So really connect with, what are those little things that help you throughout the day? What are those things that, besides everything that you've heard us say already, what are those little things that are important for you that you define as your self-care? And improve, even if it's 1% at a time. That's forward movement that will create a ripple effect to keep you moving forward the way you want to.
One example of self-care that I often use is the example of Winston Churchill. And I'm not a history buff, so I looked this up to make sure I was giving accurate information. But Winston Churchill is known for taking naps. And what I tell my coaching clients is, if Winston Churchill, the head of state, during a world war, can take a nap, then by all means, you can afford to give yourself permission for self-care as well. And this is what the internet has said about, let's see what he said. It was about being able to get, and it says in his war memoirs, Churchill wrote that, let's see, oh, sorry, that's the wrong quote. Where did it go? It was basically about getting like a day and a half work of work done. Oh, here it is. Churchill claimed that naps allowed him to do a day and a half's work in 24 hours. And you may not be the head of state during a world war. However, women physicians have so many commitments, and you too can do those little moments of self-care, whatever that is. It might be 30 seconds. It might be 30 minutes. Can you give yourself permission to make that happen? My hope is your answer is yes.
I love that. And to add one last nugget, one of the things that Erin and I talk so much about, and it's part of our mission, is the power of community. Because when we have that community, it's so much easier to ask for help. It's so much easier to share tools. We will not feel alone, like we're struggling in silence. So what is that for you? Who is around you? And even if it's not someone who's physically around you, what are the resources so that you keep that community? That's part of what Erin and I are building here. And it's one of our passions for sure.
And your community can be your partner. This morning, and when I've been so busy lately, my partner has been my husband. We've been together 28 and a half years, and he's been making my coffee every morning. I said, not only do I need my coffee, I got a coaching client this morning. I need breakfast at 8:15 so that I can get ready to do the podcast recording, and like clockwork. And I don't feel bad about it because he's helping me be successful. He's got the capacity to help me in that way. I don't know who's in your community. It could be your parent offering to babysit your kids. Say yes. So don't push your community away or think, no, I can do this, because Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? To borrow one of Brendan Burchard's phrases. And if you need more on the power of community, go back to episode 67, where Joanne and I committed the entire episode to how to create your community if you don't feel like you have the right community to support you where you're at in your life right now.
So good.
Any other thoughts on this, Joanne, about building community?
What comes to mind is, like I've said many times, is you're not alone. And it's okay to not be okay. And it's always okay to ask for help. And that's part of what we're here for as well.
Absolutely. And I actually was on an executive committee meeting just yesterday talking about the power of the community that you and I have built during our group coaching. And when there is, whether you're in person or in a Zoom or at a retreat, and these other women in medicine hear other women in medicine go, oh, you have that same issue as I do? I didn't know. I thought it was just me. And oh, that resonates with you as well. And so finding that community where you can safely share those things is so powerful. And in this episode, Joanne and I have talked about why this topic of the toll of stress and when it makes you struggle, why it's an important topic for women physicians. We've talked about how can you recognize and raise your own awareness about when this is happening, and then what you can do about it. We hope these have been helpful for you. And again, don't hesitate to go back to previous episodes where we've given you some pointers on that, including episode 67, where we'll put that in the show notes. And with that, we hope to see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.
Do you want exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with us? Then visit createmeaninginmedicine.com now, where you'll dive deeper into how you can create meaning in medicine. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Connect with us on the website and tune in to the next episode.